Hi, I'm Nicola from the Mindful Stitching Company, and I'm going to introduce you today to the wonderful world of cross stitch, and we're going to work through a really simple project together that you can create to display at home. Here it is, little Scandi bird hoop here, and it'll also introduce you to some of the basic techniques of cross stitch so that you can go off and tackle some other projects and patterns as you choose. So I'm going to introduce to you in a moment everything that you need for the course and the supplies that you'll need. There's not that many required, and you might find that you already have some of these bits at home if you're somebody who enjoys craft. So just as a brief introduction to the kind of things that you'll need some cross stitch fabric, which we call aida. You can also get linen, but we're going to work with aida today. It's a little bit easier when you're starting out. So I'll talk a little bit more about this in a moment. You're going to need an embroidery hoop. You'll see I've gone for a little pink one here for our design. You can also get plain wooden ones, and you can decorate these and paint them if you like. You'll also need a pair of embroidery scissors, so nice and sharp. Your threads, there's just 4 colours in this design, so not too expensive to get the supplies. And also, if you have different colours at home, just feel free to substitute them in. And then we have, of course, our pattern, which is available for you to download in the course information. So I'm going to switch over now to an overhead view so that you can see exactly how I'm doing everything and learn how to start cross stitch for yourself. So here we are with all of our supplies that we're going to need for this cross stitch project. We've got our pattern that you can download from the course information. We've got an embroidery hoop, little plastic one, and we have our thread colours, a needle and some aida. Now I'm going to talk you through each one of these bit by bit and tell you about different variations you can use, so you can use things you've got around the house. But first of all, let's get our embroidery hoop set up, and I'll show you how to do that. So say this is a little plastic one. You can also get wooden ones, and they come in different inch measurements. So this one is a 4-inch hoop because it's 4 inches across here, and you can get them in any size up to even sort of 14, 16-inch hoops, which obviously are very large indeed. And they're really useful for both keeping your fabric nice and tight when you're stitching, so you can just use them as an aid to stitching. They're also really useful for framing. I love framing finished designs in embroidery hoops. I think they look really pretty, and then you can just hang them up on the wall and they act as a little frame. So let me show you how they work. You'll see it comes in 2 halves. So what you need to do is take your fabric, so this is your aida, I'll explain a bit more about that in a moment, and pop it underneath here, that first inner part of the hoop. Then we take the outer part of the hoop, and you'll see it's got a little nut here that tightens it up, and we stretch it over the top. There we go. And take a little bit of wrangling, and then we tighten it up by twisting on here. Let's get a good look at that. There we go. We twist that until it becomes nice and tight, and you want it to be really nice and tight for your stitching, because that makes a big difference to how it feels when you're stitching it. Okay, so let's take a closer look at our fabric here. Now you might have some of this about the house, so you might not necessarily need to buy anything new for this project, but this is cross stitch aida. And you'll see that it's got, get it right up here for you to see, you can see there's a whole load of little holes in here, and that is what we're going to stitch through. So that's how we're going to make our little crosses which make up the design. You might be able to see that I've got a lovely sparkly glitter aida here for this project, and you can buy aida in all different sizes, different colours with glitter effects. Once you get into it, you can end up buying all sorts of wonderful things to stitch with. And as I say, you can often also find these in charity shops, or perhaps you've got a bit just knocking about the house that you can use for this project. So this one is a 14 count aida. Now just a word on what count means in cross stitch fabric. What it means is that there are 14 little holes per inch of your cross stitch fabric. So in 1 inch on here, I have 14 holes, so I have 14 stitches. So if I have a 16 count fabric, that means I will have 16 holes per inch, so my stitches will be smaller. So it's a little counterintuitive that the higher the count, the smaller the stitches, but that's the way it goes. So 14 count, 14 stitches, 16 count, 16 stitches per inch. So 14 count is a really great place to start if you're new to cross stitch, because it's quite a good size. You can stitch that quite comfortably and easily. So that's what we're going to use for this project, a 14 count aida. But if you do have any others at home and you want to use them, there's absolutely nothing to stop you. You can stitch this design on any size of aida. It will just come out a different size depending on the count of aida that you use. So if you use a 16 or 18 count, the design will be smaller. If you use a 14 count or a 12 count, it'll be a bit bigger. So let's have a look now. Pop our needle over here so we don't lose that. Let's have a look at our thread colours. So you'll see that this design just uses 4 different colours, and I've given you some suggested colours from the company DMC threads, and you can buy those online. These will cost about 69 pence, 79 pence, something like that in the UK. So you can buy them, the exact colours that I've used, or you could stitch this with any colours that you have at home. So if you have any embroidery thread just around in your sewing box or that you've used for other things, just dig it out and you can substitute in any of these colours that you like. So let's get acquainted with our pattern now. Let's move these bits over. Here we are. Okay. So here is our lovely Scandinavian bird design. There's a few things you need to know about patterns when it comes to cross stitch. The first thing is that these little squares here add up to 10. So it's 10 by 10. And what you're going to be doing is just simply counting across to know the number of stitches you need to do. So here you would do 3 of the light pink, 1 of the yellow, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of the darker pink. And that's how you follow along. But we'll stitch all of that, so don't worry, you'll see it all in action and know how to move between the colours and how to start and finish your thread. I'll show you all of that in a moment. But what you need to see here is that there is actually a little symbol in here, although as we've got so few colours, it's not such a worry because you'll be able to tell easily where to use dark pink and light pinks. It's so obvious in the colour. But if you're working on another pattern, it's got different more close shades and you're not quite sure which one to use, this acts as a little key for you. So you can see there's a little symbol here, number 1, little symbol here of just a sort of straight line, little I, and a number 2. And what you have with this is your key. So you can see here it says that for the number 1, the thread colour there is DMC 605. So that's the colour that you need to use for that little pink and that symbol. And likewise we've got for the yellow here, a little number 2 in the yellow, and that's DMC 445. So that's how that works. You just simply match it up and that's the thread colour that you need to prepare to stitch. Now there's another thing to notice on this pattern, and that is these little arrows here. So these point to the centre of the pattern. Okay, so by following that one, we know the centre is here. By following this one, we know the centre is there. So that's exactly where the centre is. And that's important because in cross stitch, you normally start a pattern from the centre. So that's what we're going to do here. We're going to begin right in the middle so that we know that it's going to fit really nicely into our hoop, and we're not sort of starting off at this side and then we run out of space for part of the heart or something like that. We know it's all going to fit nice and snugly in the centre here. So let's start stitching. That's all you need to know. I'm going to show you now how to thread up your needle and how to make your first stitches. Okay, so I've come in really close now so that you can see the stitches as they're made, and you'll see that where I've taken a thread there, I've threaded it onto my needle, onto my cross stitch needle. So that is a needle that is specifically for cross stitch. It's a little bit more blunt on the end here. So it means that you're not going to end up dividing your fabric here where you don't want to, because you just want to be in these holes to make it look nice and neat. So a slightly blunt needle means that you won't be separating those holes there. So I will put in the equipment information where you can get hold of these, but if you just search cross stitch needle you will find them. Then what I've done here is I've tied a knot here on the end. I've actually made that a double knot so it's nice and secure. And I'm going to show you my favourite method for starting a cross stitch that keeps it nice and neat. So what we need to do is find the centre of our piece, so I think it's about there, and then go up just a few holes away from that and pull your thread down. So you see our knot is here on the top, and that's just to secure the thread whilst we do our first few stitches, and then I'm going to snip it off. So that's called a waist knot. So before we begin, let's have a look at our pattern here. So we're going to be in the centre, which if we follow our centre lines here, you'll see that the centre stitches are these 5 dark pink stitches here. So I want to begin right in the middle here, so I'll do the middle stitch and then 2 on either side to make the 5. So let's come into the middle about here. So I bring my needle up, and the only thing you need to remember with cross stitch is that your stitches always need to go in the same direction. So your bottom thread always needs to go from the bottom left to the top right hole. Okay. And your top thread always needs to go from the top left to bottom right, or you can go bottom right to top left. It doesn't matter which direction you go, the threads just need to lay in this same orientation every time. So you'll pick up as you watch me stitch, you'll see that as I go, and it'll become really instinctive for you. You'll notice as well I'm not pulling very hard down on the thread as I stitch, because that will make it all look quite taut. Instead I'm just pulling it really gently, and the stitches are laying really nicely there. So for our design we need our middle stitch and then 2 more on either side to make the 5 dark pink stitches. So there we go, I've gone top right to bottom left. I don't have to finish the X every time, I can travel a bit with it. So here I go, bottom left to top right. So you'll see my horizontal line is always going in the same direction. Now I'm going to go back, so I'm going to go into the bottom right into the top left. Make sure my threads are nice and flat there. Sometimes you need to give the thread just a little tug to straighten things out. Okay. Now we're going to just on the back just skip over this middle thread. That's absolutely fine to do that. We're going to go into top there, bottom left, here we go, top right to bottom left, and then we just travel back and finish our X's. So top left to bottom right, top left to bottom right. Now that is going to become completely instinctive after you've done probably even just a few rows of your little X stitches. And that little X is basically what cross stitch is all about. So there are some other variations on stitches, but this is the main thing that you'll be doing in any cross stitch project. So once you've mastered this and you're getting nice neat X's, then you'll be able to tackle many different kinds of projects. But let's continue with this one now. So we've got our 5 stitches here. So now we want to move down and do our next row. So our stitches in the next row begin on the end here. So we don't need to worry too much about how our thread is trailing on the back, unless you want to make it very, very neat, but don't worry about that too much. The only thing you don't want to do is trail your thread on the back over long distances. Say I was doing another stitch up here, I wouldn't want to trail my thread all the way up there because it could show behind, so I would finish off my thread and start again over here. But for just moving around your design in the centre here, it's fine to move across a few stitches because my thread is currently about here and I'm going to move over here, and that is absolutely fine to do that. So I will go over, and again you'll notice I'm doing it in the same direction, so I'm going on the top there. And I'm doing 4 across this time. Okay. Just see how simple that is. Just following exactly the same direction. Just filling it in. It becomes so relaxing doing this because once you've gotten your hands to get used to the feel of the stitching and you know which direction you're going, it's just a really relaxing thing to do, and you can just lose yourself in it really. So we've now got these 2 rows. I'm going to show you now how to change colour. So what I would do if I was stitching this is I would just carry on with my dark pink. I'd move up here and I'd fill in these other stitches. But what I'm going to do so that you know how to change colour is I'm going to move onto the yellow now. So I'm going to show you how to finish off your thread. So slip this over here and run your needle just through a few stitches there. So I'm just trying to catch a few stitches. There we go. And I just run that through. I'll just do that again just to catch the thread. So that's nice and secure now, so I can now snip that. Like that, there we go. So see, that's nice and neat. This long bit is our waist knot. Now this is all now secure, so what I can do is just pull up here and just snip under here. So I snip that, okay, and then you'll see that becomes loose here, and you can just snip that as well. Nice and neat. So there we go. Okay, so I'm going to show you how to change colours now. If I was continuing on with this design, I would just stay in the pink here and move outwards and fill in all this dark pink area, but just to show you how to change colours and how simple that is. So I've threaded up my needle here, I put a knot in the end for my waist knot. I'm going to bring my waist knot in about there, and let's just have a quick look at the pattern. So we'll see that our little yellow stitches at the end here of our pink stitches, of that row of pink stitches. So down we come. Make sure my waist knot stays where it's meant to be. There we go. Oh, I've gone in too high there. So see, but if you make a mistake like that, you can just pop your needle back in the hole that you came through, and out will pop the thread. Lovely. So I need to go into this one right here, right at the end. Okay. I'm going to do my X to secure my thread, and because of this design part here, it's sort of moving around. Let me move that so you can get a good look. It's moving around in this little pretty formation here, so I'm going to finish each of these X's separately because I think that'll be as easy as here. I sort of travelled along, I did all in one direction and all in the other direction, but for these I'm going to do the individual X's, finish each one as I move on, which interestingly is known as English style cross stitch, doing that. Okay, so we've got one there, one there, Notice I'm going in the same directions again, so I'm always going bottom left, top right, so that I've got my diagonal going to the right to begin with. There we go. Lovely, and I've got that little part of that design, simple as that. So I would then run my thread through the back again here and snip it off, and then just simply carry on with my design with the colours. Okay, so you can see now that I've got to the end of my little bird's wing, so it matches my pattern perfectly. And what I'm going to do now, so you can move in any direction you like with cross stitch. So if you want to come and stitch the bottom of the bird here, that's fine. You want to do the top of the bird, his little head or his tail, whatever you want, you can head off in that direction. But it makes sense to move on to a bit that's adjoining this. So if you started over here, that's quite a lot of squares to count. You can end up getting a bit lost. So, but anything that is adjoining this wing, feel free to start stitching that. So we just progress in the same way, remembering to keep our X's travelling in the same direction. Okay, so let's have a look a little closer at our pattern here for the next section. So we've got our bird all stitched up, and we are now going to move out to this outer frame. So I'm going to go up here because it's close enough to the top of the bird that I just have to count 2 blank spaces and then I start my stitching. So that'll be quite straightforward. So let's have a look. So there's the bird there, and if you see here we have 1, 2 blank squares. So I'm going to start in this square here. So as usual, I'll do my waist knot a little way away, and then I'm going to come in, so 1, 2, and up it goes. So 2 spaces are clear, and then I do, make sure that stays out there, do my stitch. Lovely, and then from here I'm just going to follow the pattern along. So I'll go up to this next one. You could do this in half stitches like this and work all the way along and then come back, or you could do it in full stitches and complete it that way, whatever you prefer. So one thing to consider is when you're looking at this white space here, which is blank on your fabric, you're not going to be stitching there in the white. Just think about where you're trailing your threads. So if you're going, say, from here to here, hopping up to do this section, it's no problem. You don't need to finish off your thread here and restart here. You can just trail the thread across the back there and you won't really see that. But if you are working, say, here, and then you trailed it over to here, you might see that bright pink trailing along. So you might be best to finish your thread here and restart here. So it's really a judgment call, but I don't tend to go more than about 3 or 4 stitches trailing my thread because I don't want it to show at the back. So I would finish off and then restart. So that's something to think of. So now we're just going to work our way all the way around this pink, following along as we've done before. And here we are with the finished piece. So if you just carry on as I've shown you, you will end up eventually with this lovely little design. So this took me about a few hours of stitching, I'd say, the afternoon. Obviously, as you're learning, it'll take perhaps a little bit longer. But yeah, a little project of an evening or of an afternoon, and then you'll have this lovely little design here. So as I mentioned at the beginning of the session, I quite like sometimes framing my designs in hoops. So if we just fold this in, you'll see what that will look like, and that'll look really effective hung up somewhere in the house. So I'm going to show you how to do that now. It's completely optional. You could also put it into a frame, or you could maybe cut around the heart itself, put some backing fabric on it and stuff it. It could be a lovely little hanging decoration. So lots of different options there. But I'm going to show you now how to back the hoop. So you need some scissors. These are dressmaking scissors, so they're nice and sharp. Any will do. And you just need to cut in a circle around the hoop. Okay, that's great. Okay, now we have our needle here, and I'm going to, you probably would use a white thread to do this next part, but I'm going to use a pink one just so it's a little bit easier for you to see what I'm doing. So I'm just going to thread this needle here. So this is just some leftover embroidery thread that I have. You can use sewing thread too, whatever you have to hand. Now if you like, you can, got a piece of felt here, you can cut around this felt and pop a felt layer inside the hoop here before you do this next step that I'm going to show you, but I'm not going to do that because I think it's quite set in there quite nicely and I can't see any stitches showing through, so I'm just going to put felt on the back. So let me show you here how we bring this aida in so that it's not sticking out. So we're just going to do a simple running stitch all the way around the edge, and that eventually is going to start bunching the fabric, as we've seen there already. Okay, so just keep going, running that all the way around. Okay, so you can see I've finished my running stitch all the way around. I've been pulling it tight as I go, and that's concertinaed all of this fabric in so that it makes a nice neat circle. And then from the front, there we go, can't see any of the fabric poking out there. Okay, so here we are now with our piece of felt I've cut to size, the same size as the hoop, and a needle I've swapped over to a normal sewing needle with a sharp point, so make life a lot easier stitching this on than if we try and use a cross stitch needle, because I said a cross stitch needle is actually blunt on the end. So what I've done is I have just attached my thread here by just running it through a couple of times and popping a knot in there to hold it secure. And what we're doing is we're basically sandwiching this all together. So if you see here, I'm going to my thread out, I'm going to run my needle through here and then through this felt. So you see I've caught all the layers there with my sewing thread, just using normal sewing thread for this, just all-purpose sewing thread. And then I'm going to work my way around, catching the edge of my cross stitch fabric and the edge of the felt, until that is all neatly attached all the way around. So just running the needle in, catching a bit of the aida, and then coming in to catch the edge of the felt like that. It gets a lot easier once you're past this little screw, because that gets in your way a little bit. But there we go, so we just carry on like that all the way around. So here we have it with the felt backing all applied. So I've just continued to stitch these tiny little stitches like on the edge here, all the way around to hold that felt backing on, and then just finished off my thread here with a little knot at the top to keep it all secure. So this is going to act as a really nice flat back for when you're putting this up on the wall or wherever else you want to put it, and also just keeps everything contained and all the stitch work on the back all covered. And there we go, there is our design. So you can now hang that up, put it somewhere where you can really enjoy it and feel proud of all the work that you've done. Well, congratulations on finishing your very first cross stitch project, and I hope you find somewhere in your house where it can have pride of place and you can enjoy it every time you pass by. If you have got the cross-stitching bug now and you have started to realise what a fun and relaxing hobby cross-stitch can be, then do pop over to my website, which is mindfulstitchingcompany.com, and there I have a range of patterns as well as a course to take your learning further, the complete How to Cross-Stitch course. So thank you so much for joining, and I hope you really enjoyed making your Scandi bird hoop. Bye!